Welcome back to Lab 6, Scale and Load Balance Your Architecture. I'm Richard Golson, and we're at Task 3, where we create a launch template and an auto-scaling group. So if we take a look at the diagram here, you can see that we're going to use that custom AMI as part of our launch template, which we'll name lab config. We'll also identify other important components of the EC2 instance, including the instance type and security group, et cetera, et cetera. We'll combine that with an auto-scaling group to deploy new web instances in the private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. And we will ensure that that auto-scaling group is attached to the target group, which would then be attached to the load balancer. So the load balancer will be able to forward traffic from our internet users through the application load balancer and get forwarded to the web instances in each of the subnets. And this will ensure high availability. So without a scale group, we'll see that we get some other really kind of neat things. One of those with the auto scaling is the ability to provision additional EC2 instances to scale the capacity to address increased demand, to scale capacity when it's, or to reduce capacity when demand is reduced. We get to manage and maintain the instance health, balance capacity across the availability zones, and we can update and replace instances. So at any time we could update the AMI, then update the launch template, and then use that to replace the older web instances with the new updated web instances. So this makes it a lot easier to work with these kind of things. So let's go ahead and jump into this, shall we? So I've already begun this task by starting the launch template configuration. The launch template is a template that the auto scaling group needs to launch our EC2 instances. It has the information about the configuration of those EC2 instances, including the AMI, instance type, the key pair, and the security group. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now, shall we? So we'll go ahead and take a look here. You can see this is the EC2 launch templates console page. I've already clicked on create launch template and begun the configuration. So here is the create launch template. It's a single page. So it makes it really easy to configure. So you can see the settings I've already set in here. So we have the name, lab, config. Notice that you can do template versioning, etc. We're going to leave that alone. We did select auto scale guidance. So this will provide guidance that will help me set up a template that I can use with auto scaling. So that makes it a little bit easier to use. Coming down here to the launch template contents, you can see that we will be selecting under My AMIs the custom AMI we created earlier, the web server AMI. So we can see under My AMIs, owned by me, that we've selected that web server AMI, and it's the only one we have. So if we had other custom AMIs, we'd be able to find them from this list. Note that you can select other types of AMIs. It does not have to be custom. You can use one of AWS's quick start AMIs and then use user data. We'll see a little place where we can enter user data to actually configure it. Coming down here, we can see that the instance type has already been selected. It was indicated to use the T2.micro. Again, this isn't a lab. This is not production worthy. Highly likely we would need to increase the size of the instance type to something with more memory and CPU. And we could select those from here. And you can see there's a T2.small, T2.medium. It's actually really great because at any time, again, we could modify the lab template with a new instance type and increase the size of our instances. We'll leave that alone, leave it set at T2.micro. And then we're also able to select the key pair. If you recall, we use that key pair to securely connect to the instance through using Secure Shell. When we do this, we want to ensure that we have access to that selected key pair before we launch the instance. So we'd actually should have created the key pair previously and download half of that key pair and already own that. So then we would select the portion of the key pair that should be installed on all the EC2 instances. And so I've selected the one that was created previously. And if I wanted to access this, I could actually download it from here in Vocarium, where they've actually stored it under the details section here. We don't need to worry about that. And for this lab, we won't have to do anything with it. Now, when we come back down here, under network settings, note that we're not selecting VPC. We don't want to include the subnet in the network settings because that will be identified when we create the auto scaling group. We'll identify the appropriate subnets to use. So we want to leave those off of the lab template, but we do want to select the appropriate security group. And in this case, we've selected that web security group. Now note, the web security group is the same security group being used for the application load balancer. It was also used for this initial EC2 instance. That is going to allow the HTTP traffic through from all sources. We could do the same thing that we did with the RDS instance in terms of using security group chaining, and we could actually define separate security groups for the application load balancer and for the auto scaling, or the EC2 instances in the auto scaling group, and chain those together where we would only allow traffic through the web instance security group that was arriving from the application load balancer security group. Now, remember, we didn't do that for this lab, and we're not going to. We're going to use the same security group. So no chaining. We're going to allow all port 80 traffic from all sources through there. Now, coming down here, we're going to leave the EBS volume untouched. That was already identified on the AMI, so we don't need to worry about that piece. When we create the EC2 instance from this template, a new EBS volume will be created, and the size of that will be set by the template, and the contents of the template will be copied to this root volume. Note that we're not going to add any resource tags, but what we are going to do in the advanced details section, which is actually quite large, we're going to provide detailed CloudWatch monitoring. So what we'll need to do is scroll down, and you want to go slowly because it's a little hidden in here. Here it is. It doesn't leap off of all the choices. So it's only when we're changing in here, and we're going to enable this. The additional charges will apply when you use this, but what it will do is it will allow the autoscale group to respond much more quickly when we test auto scaling. And so we would need those detailed CloudWatch monitoring. So if you need highly responsive auto scaling, then using the detailed CloudWatch monitoring, which collects metrics much more quickly, then enable that. So that's the only thing we're changing there. Note that after that, we can just create the launch template. I do want to show you something that we've done previously, which is the user data section. Again, there's lots of options in here. We're not using user data because that information was already deployed to the web server, one instance that we then had captured and custom AMI from that. So that's already installed. So we do not want to employ it again. This will speed having this user data already used to configure a web server and have that baked into our custom AMI means we'll have a much faster deployment. So there we go. We're all good. Again, just a few items. We made sure that we named the launch template lab config. We identified that we wanted to use our custom AMI, web server AMI. We identified the instance type as T2.micro. We selected the vote key pair. We selected the web security group, and we enabled the detailed CloudWatch monitoring. At this point, we'll just go ahead and hit the create launch template. It creates it very quickly. All right. At this point, we can click on the view launch templates and we can see it there. And if I click on this, you can see the settings on that. So it's ready to roll. Again, if we needed to update it, we could use version control, which means that we can create a new version of this with changes like, hey, it's a different custom AMI, or I needed to modify the security group because we just determined that we wanted to use the security group chaining or the instance type. Many different things we could change. All right, we're good to go there. So our next step is to configure or create our auto scaling group. So I've already begun that process here. So you can see that we have auto scaling ready to go. So I'm going to pause the video, get that prepped, and we're going to come back and get going on that.